Not long ago, I was introduced to the writing of a man named Peter Leithart. And in one of his books, Leithart said this: religious consumers look for religious groups that give without asking much. Most people want to satisfy their needs with minimal cost. The cost of living in a racially, economically, or socially mixed congregation is comparatively high. It can be difficult to learn how to relate to people who are very different from ourselves. It requires investment of time and emotional energy, which can be unsettling. As a result, congregations become and remain highly racially homogeneous. Even in a culturally diverse nation like ours, we still tend to, even in the church, group together based on similarities. There are so many different and separate groupings that I've encountered. I've ministered here in the U.S. in Chinese churches and Korean churches and black churches. You know, when I minister in a Dutch Reformed church, I tend to tell them that my wife's mother came from the Netherlands, so they don't think of me as such an outsider. My experience years ago in a Filipino church left me with the impression that I might be part Filipino. You know, Lutheran churches tend to have a higher percentage of Germans and Scandinavians in them. And I'm just getting started. I could go on and on about the various groups. We tend to flock together with our own kind, if you will. And that's not emphatically bad. But we have too frequently used our God-given distinctives and differences to separate us. Rather than seeing those things as necessary, we use them as dividing points. You know, when someone sees something from a radically different perspective than us, when their perspective is way outside of our range of thinking, we tend to view them as odd or weird or incompatible with ourselves. But the fact is that we need people who are different than us, with different perspectives. You know, my two sons are a really good example of this. David, our oldest, is an engineer. He loves education, the whole education system. He has his master's degree, and he's dabbling with working on a second one. David can do complex math equations in his sleep. On the other hand, his brother Stephen is a horticulturalist and really an artist. He doesn't like formal education, even a little, and honestly still feels that the degree that he earned in college was a complete waste of time. He struggles with math on his best days. These two are way different from one another, but both of them are strong, committed Christians, and besides being brothers, they're also best of friends. But their friendship doesn't come from them being in lockstep with one another, of having identical personalities. No, far from it. They can discuss deep theological issues for hours, in part because they think so radically differently from one another. They each appreciate the other's perspective, different though it may be. Now, understand, those differences could potentially drive them apart, but instead, David and Stephen see those differences as a positive, not a negative. You know, honestly, I have a tendency to cringe when I see churches grouping people by affinities, churches who want to reach those who are only under 30, or those whose target audience is two working parents and with kids, or I don't know, left-handed knitters or whatever. All right, I'm being facetious now. And don't even get me started on the idea of a cowboy church. Now, of course, we can certainly have friends and spend time with people who have similar interests. There is nothing clearly inherently wrong with that idea, all right? But if that's the criteria for building a church, we're only gonna have people who are, I don't know, under 30 that preferably have a tattoo or whatever. What a foolish mistake. How can we ever learn from others who think differently than we do? How can we help each other see from a different perspective? How do we learn from those who are more mature, who have more experience than we do? How can we be impacted by youthful enthusiasm? And don't brush off those questions too quickly, because they are hugely significant. Not long ago, I came across a document called the Cape Town Commitment. Honestly, I don't know a lot about it. It came out of a major conference on evangelism that was held in Cape Town, South Africa in 2010. But in part, it says this: a most powerfully convincing mark of the truth of the gospel is when Christian believers are united in love across the barriers of the world's inveterate divisions. Barriers of race, color, gender, social class, economic privilege, or political alignment. However, few things so destroy our testimony as when Christians mirror and amplify the very same divisions among themselves. Wow. See the very differences that God intended for us to have. Age, gender, race, even personalities, things like the artistic or the academic temperament or whatever, often become the things that divide us. How sad. I mean, it's sad when we see it in the human race in general. It's even sadder when we see those divisions in the church. So here's the deal. For church leaders, the problem really is no different. We tend to hang out with people who think and look and act like us. When we find people whose theology differs very much from ours, they usually are not in our circle of friends. But maybe they should be. As leaders, maybe we should hang out with people who are different from us. Maybe it would stretch us. Maybe we'd learn a thing or two. Maybe we could help someone who, with some of the same things that we struggle with, whose theology is a bit different than ours. See, we have these isolated boxes. Southern Baptists associating only with Southern Baptists, or Assembly of God with Assembly of God. But what if, as leaders, we came together and talked and fellowshipped and became friends? What if we prayed for one another? What if we were part of the answer to Jesus' prayer that we would be one? See, I think that would not only strengthen the church as a whole, but it would also strengthen our individual congregations. And I'm pretty sure that, given the fact that our Heavenly Father plans to one day bring together people from every tribe and nation and language, I'm pretty sure it would make Him happy in the process.